Cool. It's recording. So, talk about yourself. Talk about how you started with Poetry Slam, and shoot off from there.
My name is Lea Deschenes. I've been doing poetry. I've been writing poetry as long as I can remember. I first got started performing poetry in, let's say, 1991, and started doing Poetry Slam in 92 or 93. I was on the Worcester Slam team in 93, although I didn't get to go because we went back and forth and there was no plane fare. Then in 94 for Asheville, North Carolina. 1995.
Charlotte.
No, because it was Asheville, Ann Arbor. And then in 1996, I was coaching Worcester. I met that one. In 97, I was on the Providence, Rhode Island Slam team. And then I was pretty much done until a fluke of nature in 2005. And I ended up being the representative for Worcester to the individual World Poetry Slam, which was here in Worcester. So mostly, it's somewhere in there I got an MFA in poetry. I like poetry a lot.
Oh, by the way, I got a degree in poetry.
Yes. Yeah, they're not music. I think it's funny because, I mean, to me, I have an undergraduate degree in theater. So that's kind of how I came to slam, is especially at the time, a lot of people, I never understood why some people read their poetry as if they hated it and wanted it to die. I figured there's all this emotion going on in the writing. It would be nice if some of that showed when you read it. And that was kind of why I liked slam. But I've never thought of it as kind of mutually exclusive things where you have to be a page poet or a performance poet, or I don't know, man. I'm just gonna write and read some stuff and hopefully people will figure it out.
It's all good. Let's see. So tell me, like, what do you like to write about?
Lots of things. I mean, I suppose it's the stuff that gets stuck in my head, which, you know, might be philosophy or might be that I think it's some random biology trivia is really cool.
Too.
You know, I've had a poem that was originally titled Ontogeny Recapitulates Phylogeny. They made me change it. I have one I wrote because they had in Higgins House, they had the 100th anniversary of Einstein's theory of relativity. They had a reading. So I wrote something for that was actually remixed bits of the general and specific theories of relativity. I just used the language from there and swapped in. Yeah, and that ended up being the title poem for my book.
So it's like a little sciencey sort of side to it, or?
Yeah. I love weird pop science and neuroscience, you know. I think it's fascinating to look at how the brain does stuff and think about how that affects our experience. So I guess I like to talk a lot about how we work through our experience of the world, you know, how we process it.
Cool. So do you have like people who've inspired you in terms of your writing style or how you perform or anything like that?
I love Laurie Anderson. I mean, she's technically more performance art, but I love the way that she can take a whole bunch of smaller stories and make them into a big picture. And you cannot summarize in sentences what it is that she's doing, but you know after you've watched a whole performance of hers that there's this huge structure that it's building.
Cool. So you said that you had some, let's say, some milestones. Like, you said that at one point, I think 2005, you became the representative for Worcester, right?
Yeah, it was kind of, there was a slow night while they were having preliminaries, and somebody asked me if I would slam, and I said, sure, what the heck, and then I ended up in finals. And I was really expecting Karina Bain, who is a fantastic poet, to kick my ass. And I had a good night, and we both ended up going, which I'm really glad. Yeah, Karina Bain is also from Worcester. You should look her up. She's in Brooklyn now, I think. But she is a fantastic poet.
Tell me a little bit of that experience. Was it the World Champions, or what you?
The individual world poetry.
Yeah.
It's the competitions are usually they're kind of stressful, but they're the least interesting parts of going to these for me. Like when they put Poetry Slam together, the whole idea was that if you put up a sign that says there is an open mic poetry reading tonight, you will end up with like 3 poets and a bunch of people walking by very quickly. If you put poets fight for blood and money outside, suddenly a lot more people are interested and will come in to see what the heck is going on. So to me, it's like, I like watching people perform, but I think especially as slam has gone on, one, you end up watching a lot of poetry, and after you've seen like 50 of one kind of poem, you can get a little jaded. But two, people get kind of, I think, sometimes caught up in their expectations of what slam poetry is supposed to be like, and watching somebody do what they think they're supposed to do is a lot less interesting than watching them do what they have to do or they really want to do with poetry. So.
Cool. So you've been in Worcester for quite a bit of time, right?
Yeah. I started coming up because I was helping out in doing theater here at WPI, and then eventually moved up here.
So what do you think makes the Worcester scene unique compared to other areas?
I really like the community of it. I think it's pretty much, that's always my favorite thing about Poetry Slam, is you meet people and you end up knowing people you would never get to know and going places you would never think of going, even if a lot of the times it's the basements and bars of places. Like we went on a tour in the Midwest and we ended up in Columbus, Ohio and Kalamazoo, Michigan, and these are not places that are tourist destinations, but it's nice to see parts of the world that you haven't seen and get to meet people who you have something in common with because you all love poetry. So it's it's kind of like any fandom. There's always that sense of community, and Worcester has always been pretty tight about it. Like we try and look out for each other, I think.
Very strong bonds between all.
Yeah, because I'm not even really actively involved in slam or so much the poetry community right now, but I still have close ties with a lot of the people that are involved.
Cool. So you started in 1991, 1992, somewhere around there. So how was the scene back then for the first 10 years or so?
Oh God, we were all young and speedy and had energy to be up all the time and go to 4 readings a week. It used to be we used to call it the Golden Triangle because Boston, Providence, and Worcester are all about an hour from each other. So you could conceivably go to the Cantab on a Wednesday, and Providence, I forget where they were on, a Monday or Tuesday, and then Worcester was on Sunday. So you could go to a lot of readings, and when you're
so it's the community kind of extends a little bit more.
Yeah, and people, and you got to know everybody's work too. I think one of the biggest formative experiences for me as kind of a writer and doing Poetry Slam was I was with 2 of my friends, and the first slam I was ever in was at the Old Vienna Coffee House in Westboro, which is gone now. But and we had no idea they were holding a slam, and we were the only 3 who would do it. That was pretty much it, and because it's a 3-sided die, it's easy to come up with the first on. I won that, and this put me into the Boston-Cambridge semifinals for the slam because Worcester did not have a slam at that point. And so I went to the Cantab, I was proud to have my ass kicked by Patricia Smith and Lisa King and Rick McIntyre and Michael Brown, and pretty much there were so many people there who had so much more experience and were so amazing. But it was awesome to get my ass kicked there and see, wow, you can do that. Yeah.
So Worcester didn't have a slam back then. It was more.
No, Worcester started having a slam. Probably, I mean, the first year we tried to field a team was '93, because that was San Francisco. And I remember we wanted to go, and I had a plane ticket, and then nobody else could go, so I canceled my plane ticket, and then they said, well, maybe we're going to go after all, and by then it was too expensive to get a plane ticket. So whoever could get the plane ticket went.
Wow. So, could you elaborate a little bit, like how like things kind of rolled from that point on, like?
Well, I mean, pretty much everybody just kind of threw in, it's like people who were involved. We didn't have, I don't know that we were very organized about fundraising back then.
So it's just more like hey, you're a poet, I'm a poet.
Yeah, hey, let's take this coffee house and turn it into a poetry slam. That was kind of, I mean, the first, when we went to Asheville, like, I had to put the hotel and I think the van on my credit card. And I was young and pretty poor, so I was afraid they were just going to find the credit card exploded with a bunch of poets strewn around next to it.
Very humble beginnings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's always, I mean, no one ever goes into poetry going like, because I want the big bucks. So it's kind of like that. I mean, especially Asheville, I think, was very exciting just because it was still pretty new back then. I think it was probably the first year that Poetry Slam kind of opened up beyond like 5 or 6 teams. I forget how many there were. There were probably like maybe 15 to 20 teams, and it's just as gauge now, I think there's like 52.
Oh, I think there's more.
Yeah.
There's like 80.
There's a whole lot. But it was fairly tiny. But we were all just so amazed that there were that many of us in one place, and
Holy cow!
Yeah, it was just like, let's set loose a whole bunch of poets on Asheville, North Carolina, and take over the city. We ended up, we were competing against Syracuse, I think, in our first bout, and we sat with them and we were cheering each other on during the bout. Worcester's never been, or at least I've personally never been, I don't think Worcester in general has ever been very focused on the score part of the competition. I would rather, I think it's more important to win over the audience than to necessarily worry about the 5 judges. To like say what you have to say.
Energy out.
Yeah, and present what you have to say and present it well, and don't worry so much if it's focus grouped to, but Def Poetry Jam would totally want this.
So you coached at one point for the teams here?
Yeah.
What's your style of coaching? Like, for example, I used to do mock trials, so we just kept on hitting question after question, and then trying to work on presentation skills and pretend to be a lawyer, so.
That's why generally I have said that to coach a slam team, you need to know 2 things. And one is, again, and repeat as necessary. And the other one is, they're there, dear, they're there. And that covers like 90%, because most of the time you're working with people who are pretty good. So what you have to do is make sure people do not freak out, because it's easy to freak out. And make sure that you've done enough things that it's kind of in your muscle memory, so that even if you're having that, staged rush of adrenaline, your brain hopefully will not blank.
So it's kind of like just chill out, man. Just get into the groove of things and roll with it.
And you can try and think about like, well, I have this person that does really intense, heady kind of pieces, and I have this person who's really funny, and how could I use those? You can strategize forever and a day and drive yourself absolutely insane, and it may or may not do you any good whatsoever. You can try and like you can try and judge a crowd. You know, if the crowd seems to hate anyone doing funny material, you may think, well, perhaps it is not the night for that comedy piece. But sometimes it's good to switch things up too.
All right, I think that's pretty much all the questions I have for you. So let's go over to your husband.
Hi. My name is Victor Infante. I've been performing and publishing for 25 years. But we're talking about slam. I started slam. I'm from Southern California originally. And slam came late to Southern California because we had a sort of self-contained environment, ecosphere, if you will. So we really didn't need a lot of the same mechanisms that were happening in the rest of the country. But on the other hand, it meant poets from Southern California never left. So we had a very big, vibrant scene, and around 1995, would have been Ann Arbor, a couple poets from Southern California went out and investigated. They went to nationals. They came back and they said, "We have to bring this here. We have to bring our poets to nationals." Da 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 da. So I was kind of in that first wave of poets trying to organize slams in Southern California. I ended up coaching a team from Long Beach, California. And we took a team in 1996 to nationals in Portland, Oregon. And we got our butts kicked royally hard because we didn't really know what we were doing. We knew a lot about poetry. We did not know a lot about slam. So we thought knowing a lot about poetry would be enough, and we were wrong. On the other hand, I met my wife there. Hi. So that's so there. I have nothing but good thoughts for that year. 97, I came back. I moved to Worcester to be with Lea. And you were on the Providence Slam team that year.
Yeah.
And I was sort of assistant coach on that team.
Yeah, that was a weird year because Ray Davies was the coach, Laura Moran was on the team, and she had been coaching Seattle previously. I coached Worcester previously, and I was on the team. Victor was around because we split a car, and he had coached Long Beach, and then we had two people who had never gone to nationals before. So,
Lots of different coaches.
Yeah, well, because Ray was the official coach, and since Victor and Laura and I had all coached before, we were like, "You're the coach."
But everybody was throwing ideas out. It was actually pretty good. You would think it wouldn't work. There would be too many cooks but it worked pretty well.
Yeah. But I think we were all like, "Well, Ray, you're in charge. Here are my ideas." Yeah.
But then we moved back to California for a spell and helped.
Oh yeah, I coached Laguna Beach in that too.
You coached Laguna Beach in that. I was slam master, Lea coached, and we put out a team in '98 to go to Austin, Texas. So that was myself, Derek Brown, who later went on to found Right Bloody Publishing, which Lea and I both have books on. Chris Tannehill, who was a wonderful Wookiee of a man, just huge surrealist sort of stuff, and Mindy Nettifee, who's kind of a big deal these days, and she just put out her third book, Glitter in the Blood. But so that was a really exciting team to be on. We did a couple more. We stayed a couple more years in California, and then sort of life happened, and we had to move back here. And I ended up taking a job working for the Telegram, and that's kind of was the transition, just real life of being really involved in slam to, well, okay, we love you guys, but we're going to be over here on the side for a while. We'll pop in every now and again.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Well, I tend to, like, we joke because, they cart me out every so often because I helped co-found the Poets Asylum, so they wheel me out in a dolly and I get to say yes once we held it in a station wagon because the door was locked on the place.
Sounds like an interesting story.
Oh, that was pretty much, no, it's pretty quick. We used to go to, Worcester Artist Group was in Cherry Valley, they had a space, and they kept forgetting to unlock the door, and one time it was cold and we all ended up having the reading in Mary Ellen's station wagon. On the last day we had a reading there, I finally figured out I could pick that door with a credit card. And I was very sad I had not figured that out much sooner.
But yeah, so I think what happened sort of, we moved back here, and we were just at a different place with our poetry, both. We were much more interested in publishing. We were reading a lot,
Yeah.
but not slamming so much. You know, there comes a point where you kind of got to leave it to the new voices.
Yeah, that was actually the point I was going to make. Like, the thing I like most about the Poets Asylum, like, if I feel good about anything, it's the fact that it does not need me. I mean, I like the idea that it's community. You know,
new leadership every single time to take over.
Yeah, like, I think it's good for readings to grow and adapt, and for the people who have the energy. I've seen some people who run things maybe a little too long, and they end up getting really bitter about the things they're running. Like, I think if you get to the point where if you're constantly going, well, why aren't people grateful that I'm doing this, or, you know, why aren't I getting enough ego boo or whatever, it's, you know, time to pass it on to somebody who just wants to do it for the love of it.
Yeah. And there's always, you know, it'll wax and wane from time, but eventually it comes around, there's always new voices coming out of there, and that's as it should be. But yeah, so we're in a weird place right now because we're both on Write Bloody, which is the same publishing house that a lot of veteran slammers and performance poets are on.
We're like the quiet, weird page corner.
Yeah. But, you know, they are our friends and they are our peers, and, you know, and nothing but love and respect. But so we're always in that sort of kind of floating between two worlds sort of bit right now where we are.
Well, and I think it's funny too, because I mean, I could get 6 MFAs in poetry, and people still always ask about slam first. It's like, if you've ever done slam, that's like the only thing you've ever done. It's really weird. Like, Patricia Smith still gets it. She got nominated for a National Book Award. And
people are still like...
People will still be like, slam! And yes, she has done that. She rocked the house with that. But it's funny how people seem to want to... If you do that, they want you to be only that, or they want you to be like an exception. And I think a lot of people out of performance poetry have kind of... You know, it's like, you got your academia in my performance poetry. You got your performance poetry in my academia. Like, well, they're not... You can want to write well. You can want to perform well. These are not mutually exclusive things.
I assume that, like, maybe writing would... I mean, like, performing it, you'd have to have some sort of level of pretty good writing.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are things that work better in one medium than are another. I mean, you can do things facially that will get a lot more mileage.
Some people are like better like scientifically. Some people like to be creative, but you need a little bit of a mix of both.
Exactly.
And I think I think this might be an important point, really, when you get to it. Not everybody is saying the exact same thing when they say slam.
Yeah.
And I think in this conversation we've been talking very narrowly about the actual competition. Specifically the national competition.
Well, I mean, it's pretty big points. I'm just looking more...
No, but I think, but I just think it's time to drag it in right now, because you can also look at slam as a movement, like beat or modernism or any of those. And in that, I would still say we're probably still slam poets, because philosophically we're...
Yeah, like, do I think anybody can go be a poet? Well, you know, like, sure. You know, you want to write about arc welding? That's awesome.
Sure, and we believe that performance matters, that how you present the poem is important, that the audience has a right to an opinion about the experience. Yeah. You know, these are things that I think are fairly universal across poets that have been through slam, whether they consider themselves slammers or not. Mm-hmm. And so. In us and Patricia and Derek and the kids at the asylum and all of it, I think are kind of still always going to be a little linked by those ideas.
Yeah.
You know, that we don't need a university or a corporation telling us that this is actually a poem.
This is a slam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we can make that judgment for ourselves. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's part of why a lot of us, as we get older, it's like, well, I've done slam. I like slam. I'm glad it's still there. I don't need, it's not really what I'm writing for right now. I mean, I think one of the things slam is best at is getting especially a first-time audience really excited about poetry. And I'm not a first-time audience anymore, and maybe I'm writing stuff that's maybe not quite. Maybe you need to sit and think about a little more, which is hard to do if you've got we're going to go very fast for 3 minutes and then stop. I have stuff well, this is a minute long. it went, unless you're in, the individual slam actually does have a 1 minute round. I loved that. But if you're trying to do that in a regular slam, it can be really difficult, And again, I think locally, Worcester, I think is pretty good about, we don't care as long as it's good. But I think the higher up you go in the competition, the more what people expect gets rewarded. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad poetry that gets rewarded. It just means it's
It needs to fit a certain criteria.
Sure.
Yeah, if you see someone, he's very loud and seems to be politically fired up about something, and that can go a long way, especially, if they're voicing for underrepresented or marginalized groups. There is a lot of you don't hear that a lot of other places, and it's very exciting to hear it. And then, if you've been to a bunch of these things and I've heard that poem 50 times by other people and done better, you get jaded. But it's still important that it's there, I guess. But it's not what you want to write anymore, It's kind of like, I have a friend from grad school, I used to joke, I've written so many I hate my ex-boyfriend pieces. I have to write maybe my ex-boyfriend isn't really so bad, and I'm complicit in this arrangement. And, after a while you have to kind of move on and, well, what do you write now? What does this mean?
And I think when we started with slam, way back in the 90s, what you mostly had were relatively established writers, that had sort of careers going on as best you can back in, especially in the 90s, that were all meeting each other, but their voices were all very different. They had a lot in common, philosophically, but their writing wasn't influenced by each other because they were only just discovering each other at that point. And that was really exciting when you first encounter a poet like Patricia Smith, or you first encounter a poet like, Lisa King, rest her soul. When you were seeing these poets for the first time, it was really, really exciting, and it was all very new, and they were seeing us, and we were going around the country meeting these people. But we weren't really new poets, for the most part, back then. And now we're at a point where two things have changed, where poets have grown up in slam. So there's a whole generation now.
They're being raised.
Sure, and they're doing what all young artists do. They imitate. Mm-hmm. Now they're actually, that next generation has actually started coming into their own voice now, and I think that's really exciting. They're becoming interesting artists.
Cool.
A few years ago, maybe not so much, but now, but the others, so the other side of that is an audience had no idea what to expect 20 years ago. At all. They had no idea what was going to happen in that bar. Now they have a pretty good idea. They've seen Slam Nation, they've seen Def Poetry Jam. They're there because they want to see those things.
Although I have had to be people are like, oh, you're slam, you must be urban, hip. And I'm like, I'm a white girl from the burbs. I am neither fresh nor fly, and if I spell things with a PH, it's because they have a Greek root. It's just, that's all cool, but, that's not what I do.
So you'd say back at the beginning of the movement, it's more like a bit of a potluck.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if you're looking at, you try to compare Patricia and Hal Sirowitz, who's, become kind of a big deal and was at the time, the Invisible Man out of San Francisco.
Jeff McDaniel.
Jeff McDaniel from
Daphne
DC.
Gottlieb.
These were radical voices, and they still are. They were it was mostly outsider writers who just really didn't have a place at that point in time in mainstream publishing. And that was sort of what, because you got to understand, American poetry died in the 70s. It was dead, buried. The 70s and 80s were awful. And until Mark Smith in Chicago, who's, construction worker from Chicago, comes up with this great idea. It's like, hey, let's have poets fight for blood. There was nothing going on. And if you didn't fit a very narrow criteria, you had no place in that world. So a lot of the most talented poets in the country had nowhere to be.
Yeah, I would never have even thought, I liked doing poetry, I liked doing open mics and stuff, but without Slam, I don't think I ever would have ended up getting an MFA. It was just like there was this perception that we could all write our poems over here, and then there were people in the colleges who wanted to write everything in like sonnet formats, and it all had to be very highfalutin, you would not be screaming about your crappy day job at McDonald's or
Okay. All right, let's just go over some other quick points. Any people who inspired you for your writing?
A lot of them, actually. A lot of poets you would not have heard of. Maybe you should have. I studied poetry under Ted Walker back when I was going to school in England. I saw Ted Hughes, the husband of the late Sylvia Plath, read in one of his last readings, and that changed my life.
That sounds amazing.
That was... my entire poetic voice was shaped in that moment. It's like I saw everything I could be doing. So that was very exciting. And I really never felt that again until 5 years later when I saw Patricia Smith read in Long Beach. And that was doors opening up left and right. I to this day, I still have to credit her with so much. And then it would be a litany of about 30 to 50 writers after that. But I would say those two were really the big moments. And they were both, I find it telling that they were both moments that I saw, that I was there live for, as opposed to reading. Because I read poetry.
Right.
I'd even been to poetry. I'd even read, done features at that point by the time I'd seen Ted Hughes. That was like 92, I would say.
Very visceral experience for you.
Yeah, this was different. This was something more than, the experience was so much more intense than what I had been experiencing before. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard as a writer to say who influences you, because for me it's like everybody, and it's not, there are writers, I mean, like locally, Tony Brown, I've known him forever, he's an amazing writer. He has a blog called Dark Matter, and he's published he's put up
more than 1,000.
Yeah, 1,400 poems this year.
Well, I think it's over the last 2 years. So.
Or whatever. It's some stupid large number, and he's always trying something new. He's always pushing his art, and I find that really inspiring. There's slam people. There's Jack McCarthy. There's Laurie Anderson from performance art. There's I love Tom Waits. And every so often he sneaks in as an influence. So I think it's basically if you're writing, you need to pay attention to everything, and then it is whatever bits that stick kind of come out when you write.